are live now. So, good afternoon, everyone from Kigali, Rwanda. I warmly welcome you to another edition of a Living Archive. Whether you're joining us from Africa, Europe, Asia, the Americas, or elsewhere around the world, thank you for becoming part of this shared conversation. Today, we gather not only simply to discuss artificial intelligence, we gather to ask what kind of a future we are breathing when machines increasingly influence what humanity always will be remembering as now we remember. Before we speak about artificial intelligence, I'd like to begin somewhere much as order, before algorithm, before database, before cloud computing, before search engine. There was a memory carved by mothers, memory carved by elders, memory carved by storytellers, gathered beneath village trees, memory carried in songs, ceremonies, proverbs, sacred landscape, and everyday acts of care. Long before humanity built digital archives, communities themselves were the archive. Every family was a library. Every day in a family was a living repository. Every chapter became the next chapter. This is the Africa from which a living archive draws its inspiration. Many of you know that this is initiative emerged from our work with Open Restitution Africa. As the heritage began returning home, we discovered something profoundly important. The return of correction is never the end of restitution. It is the beginning. Objects may return, but relationship must also return. Knowledge must return. Communities must reconnect. Stories must once again be told. Only then does the heritage truly become living again. That realization inspired one simple question. Archives became living spaces for dialogue rather than static repositories. I'd like to address these realization that inspired from this one question. Can archives become living spaces for dialogue rather than static repositories? If so, that question becoming a living archive. The journey, which started September 2025, one conversation have become another, one speaker became many, one station became a growing community, one idea became an emerging ecosystem connecting heritage, technology, education, indigenous knowledge system, media archive, universities, innovators, and policymakers. Today, gathering is another chapter in that living ecosystem. Thank you once again. And artificial intelligence is transforming how knowledge is created, organized, recommended, translated, and preserved. Increasingly, algorithms influence what we discover, what we trust, what we became. We choose to become visible, what disappears. They are becoming quite custodians of memory. Yet, algorithms inherit the values of the people who design them. If cultural memory is absent from AI, its decision will also be absent of culture. That makes today's discussion not simply technical, it is ethical, cultural, political, education, and profoundly human. Thank you once again. Today's conversation revolves around one question. When machines curate memory, who shapes the stories that shape our future? Introducing today, we privileged to welcome three remarkable contributors who work represent complementary dimensions of the challenge. Together, they help us not only how intelligence learns, but how humanity remembers. We're going to explore this with them. And thank you so much. Tatenda serves as a project coordinator of an AI of our own. His work explores AI designed for the global south through indigenous knowledge systems, data governance, and community-centered innovation. Tatenda reminds us that AI should not only simply become more intelligent, it should become more representative, more equitable, more accountable, more human. It's a tender. If memory is becoming digital infrastructure, we should have the responsibility to design that infrastructure.
Okay. If memory has to become infrastructure, I mean, it's a very interesting question, but also an interesting point that we need to reflect on.
Yes, please. Yes, please. We are allowed. We are allowed as you speaking. We give you enough time for your
okay. So yeah, I was saying it's something that we also need to reflect on when we talk of memory from I would say from a global South perspective, but also from an African perspective. As you have said earlier, that collective memory is something before the age of technology, before the age of social media. It's something that was being understood from a people's perspective. But then the challenge that we have been facing over years, I think we are having these generational gaps between the old and the young, which means memory is not being transferred through the right channels to the younger generations. So now we are seeing the rise of AI systems, which are built on data, which already is skewed. And the question now is, how do we ensure that the same data that we feel like it represents our memory, it does represent our memory in actual sense? So I think the responsibility to make sure that we have this collective memory, we have the memory that reflects the people, it rests upon the same people. So it rests upon the communities. So in this case, I would say it is not the responsibility only of the tech developers, but it has to be a responsibility also of the communities. There has to be a partnership between the tech developers and the communities. But in this case, communities should not be understood just as partners, but they should be understood as active key stakeholders that can shape this memory. I want you to understand that it doesn't have to start with the data, I would say. It has to start also with the framework, the infrastructure, how the infrastructure is designed, how the infrastructure is set so that it reflects the ideologies, the philosophies of the communities. So I think at the end of the day, the responsibility is not a one-sided kind of answer. It has to be, I would say, 50-50, because then we have the communities, but also we have the tech developers, and it has to be that, reciprocal relationship between those two parties. But I would believe that it doesn't have to be the tech person or tech developers going into the community to dictate. It has to be communities deciding what they really want and how they want their knowledge, how they want their histories, how they want their collective memories to be represented within these systems. So yeah, I think that would be my understanding.
Thank you so much. Actually, this highlights the reason why co-creation is really critical to go with a bottom-up approach instead of coming up with the up down. So this is what we need along digital humanities. This is all about the digital heritage, and this is where community, culture, creativity, and innovation meets. And I think this is how AI may look like. Thank you, Tatenda. Your reflections remind us that responsible AI cannot emerge from technology alone. It must emerge from communities. Yet, before AI ever ran it from data, Africa had already developed sophisticated system for transmitting knowledge across generations. To explore what wisdom, we now turn oral traditions to Dr. Bulami. He's a scholar of Dr. Bulami Edward Fonyuy, a scholar of oral literature, cultural heritage, post-colonial studies, heritage restitution. He's a professor from University of Bamenda, Cameroon. Dr. Bulami's works remind us that memory has always lived in peoples before it lived in institutions. Dr. Bulami, thank you for giving us your time. And, when you describe Africa's processing living archive, what do we mean? What might artificial intelligence learn from societies where memory always been rational rather than merely recorded?
Thank you, Elisha. If I'm not
You're
mistaken,
welcome, Doctor.
Elisha Clever.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think it's a wonderful privilege for me to participate in this important conversation on AI algorithms and memory politics when machines curate memory. I mean, I thank the organizers of of a Living Archive for this invitation. As a scholar
Thank
of
you so
oral
much.
literature, indigenous knowledge systems, African cultural heritage, and restitution studies, I approach this today's theme from a simple but profound conviction. And what is my conviction? Memory is not merely stored, it is lived, it is shared, and it is practiced. So when we find a situation where memory does not come from community, that is when there is a worry. So across Africa, long before, as we have already said, long before archives were built or libraries created and established, communities already had their they had already developed very sophisticated systems for preserving that knowledge. And so history, for example, history was transmitted through oral narratives, proverbs, songs, praise poetry, rituals, sacred landscape symbols, and the wisdom of elders. These were not, to me, they were not primitive alternatives to written archives. They were complete knowledge systems that stood as our identity, that stood as African identity, that told the world who we are. And so this, in my opinion, reminds us of the fact that archives is much more than a building. It is much more than database. It is a living relationship between people, between their culture, their language, and their place. So today, artificial intelligence is transforming how humanity collects, organizes, and retrieves information and interprets that knowledge. But then, AI should not be allowed to replace community intelligence. It should not be allowed to replace community knowledge, because it is the community that gives meaning to whatever AI has to produce. And so knowledge begins, but with the community, and AI simply preserves that knowledge, but community gives it the meaning. AI does not give meaning to community knowledge. It is the community that gives knowledge to that AI, to whatever AI system that they are modeling on. So AI presents profound ethical questions when it comes to knowledge storage. And artificial intelligence, we should all know, comes from, it is whatever it has in store, it comes from us, comes from the human before it is taught there. And so it is the human that needs to give interpretation, give meaning to it. If the information, if data is biased, then information that AI produces will be biased. If the data is rooted on colonial on colonial biases, then what AI will give out will be on colonial biases. And what we should know is that if we rely on written archives in order to get information from AI, we are going to at one moment find ourselves wanting, because AI had been dominated by the biggest data set comes from the West. It comes from the colonialists. And so if Africa has to get their voice into it, then Africa, African, the developers of that AI system must begin from the African communities. They must go to the roots, because the African knowledge is lived. It is lived experience. It is shared experience.
Sure.
It is experience that is practiced.
Wow.
So they must go to the communities in order to get meaningful interpretation of the knowledge.
Wow, thank you so much, Bulami. This is a living archive, as you've been introducing. This is a purpose and a reason. Every Tuesday we intend to have this conversation to really explain what a living archive looks like. And thank you so much, Dr. Bulami. Your reflection reminds us that preserving memory is not simply preserving information. It is preserving context, meaning, identity, relationships. That naturally brings us to another essential dimension of today's conversation: how knowledge itself governed, how stories became recorded, and how records became trusted in memory. We are so grateful to have Jeanette Seko. Are you around? All right, Jeanette Seko, her contribution brings together a unique combination of expertise in knowledge and records management, storytelling, and digital knowledge systems and governance. Her work explores how society organizes knowledge in ways that remain meaningful to the people they serve. Janet reminds us that archives are not only technical systems, they are human systems. They influence what communities will remember, how institutions make decisions, and how future generations inherit knowledge. Janet, it's a pleasure to welcome you to a living archive.
Thank you very much for having me. Am I audible?
Yes, please, very crystal.
Thank you. Apologies for the aesthetics. I had the time falls on my school run. I have 2 kids to pick up who are at school, so I had to make do with what's possible under the circumstances. And I think, based on what has been said by the very esteemed scholars of AI and indigenous knowledge, I'm just an enthusiast. Hello?
Yes, please. I'd like to appreciate you. This is my time you give to us, because the motherhood really emphasizing what a living archive it is, what was looking before anything. And I think you're the right candidate to let us understand how the human memory would not be, simply replied by the digital memory. And to address this question to you, Janet, long before digital repositories, families were the humanity's first archive, as I've been mentioning, the mothers, grandparents, storytellers, and communities transmitted knowledge that shaped character as much as memory. So as they are increasingly organized what we know, how do we ensure digital memory strengthens rather than replace these living systems of knowledge? Thank you, Jeanette.
Thank you so much once more for that question and also for the opportunity. I would like to start first by quoting something that I've posted before to show that memory of humans cannot be replaced by systems or tools that we have that are digital. A while back, I posted somebody and they said AI provides and uses information, but humans gives experience. So the experience that we have in human mind, it's way deeper than any system that we have or algorithms that are available there. So we need to be cognizant of the fact that the tools that we have can never ever replace the human mind, because it's very vast, it's very complex. And you know how one person can look at one image and have a different interpretation of it based on what happened the previous day, based on where they are now. You know, your cultural background, your education background can have an impact on how you interpret that image. So from that perspective, when we look at things like your AI, your bots, whether it's generative or predictive, it's dependent on what we as humans put in it. It's dependent on the information we gather. It's dependent on the databases that we are there, what the archivists have gathered, the records that are there. But the human mind works based on other environmental factors that we cannot all, like, I don't think, eventually we might, but I don't think it's possible to implement them or incorporate them from an artificial intelligence system that we might have. So my enthusiasm about IKS more so is because those systems have made changes, whether we are aware of them or not, into how we do things, in how we grow in different fields. For example, I am a very passionate person about agriculture, and I've come to realize that in my studies that indigenous knowledge in rural places or even urban areas where people prefer to use indigenous knowledge has played a high role in how they farm, in how they make sure they have yield, and also in how they share the knowledge, and how, regardless of, we can say IKS, it's geographical, it has also moved from one areas to the other. There was a time when I was doing research about agriculture, and this guy learned about how they plant peanuts from another farmer, I think it was Zambia or Zimbabwe, where they use a different method in order to have high yield and also to save water. So long before we had all these things, we have knowledge that has been used. We have stories. As the doctor said, oral history is very important in how we do things. It's very important in how we grow in a community. So we need to make sure that we preserve it. And even if we are to implement and collaborate with artificial intelligence, we as African, we need to make sure that the information that is gathered in those systems, it is a true reflection of how we do things. It's a true reflection of our history. It's a true reflection of our memories. And it's a true reflection of of our identity as Africans, because as the doc said, if we are to allow a system that is based on Western culture to manage our records, to manage our documents without us having an impact, it will definitely deter the picture and distort the picture of who we are as African in general. And we do know, like, as things are going, we tend to get our stories changed to suit a particular narrative. So it is the responsibility of the African scholars, it's a responsibility of us as individuals to ensure that what is fed in this system, it's a true reflection of Africans, and it's a true reflection of our experiences, and we need to understand how we probe it and how we go about managing it, that it has the right knowledge and the databases that are used where the information is gathered for this AI bots to provide information, because younger kids are slanting more to that. We need to ensure that it's a true reflection of who we are as Africans, and we don't lose the importance of our cultures and our identity. Thank you.
That is very wonderful, and thank you so much, Janet, for your contribution. It really matters a lot. You know, you draw from the motherhood to the governance to the responsible citizenship, but also proper way to approach the digital transformation, because there is no way to escape. We're here to run the possible and a feasible way to adapt within the what it really contributes to the community. Tatenda, it will, as now you're in New Zealand, thank you, almost 2 a.m. and thank you for your time. We'd like to place some quick questions to you to let you have a bit of rest for the tomorrow's, today already achievements. You know, the time zone is. Thank you. Knowledge management has traditionally focused on preserving information. Should the next generation of archives place equal emphasis on preserving context, relationships, and all cultural meaning? What you think? Did you get my question?
Your question is directed to? Okay.
I was directing your question to you, Tatenda. Can you hear me? Or anyone in the room who may respond quick.
Could you repeat the question again, please?
Yes, if the knowledge management has traditionally focused on preserving information, should the next generation of archives place an equal emphasis of preserving context, relationships, and cultural meaning, or maybe something else?
Can I come in?
Yes, please.
I think that particular question fills me with some hope, because the future of African cultural heritage will not be shaped only in museums or universities. It will also be shaped by young Africans who build the technologies of tomorrow. And so if I were to address the young Africans to tell them about the future of AI in Africa and the innovations that are needed, I will give them the following advice. One, I will begin with I will tell them that they should always begin with the community. They should begin with the community. Why? And they should begin with the community and not with technology. Why do I say so? Because AI is a tool, not the goal. Let them spend time with elders, storytellers, traditional leaders, artists, archivists, musicians, and local historians. Listen to them before they build the whatever system they are building, because the best cultural technology grows out of relationships. It does not grow just with algorithms. The second advice I will give these young Africans who will venture into that is that they should respect that culture is living. For example, a song, a proverb, a mask, or a sacred object carries meaning because people continue to use it, to interpret, and to value it. So they should avoid treating culture as data alone. They should ask how the AI, no, the AI can support living traditions rather than simply storing information. And so they should design. Another piece of advice would be that they should design with permission and respect. Not every story or ritual should be digitized or made public. Some knowledge is sacred. For instance, in my place, in my community, which is the community in Cameroon, there are some of the rituals are sacred and at the same time secret, and are performed in restricted environments. Now, when you take that knowledge, when you take things that ought to remain in sacred environments, and you go out with them to digitize them, and then to put them into AI systems for the world to visit and to enjoy, then you have violated the culture of the people, and so they should respect. There are even some of these cultural practices in my land, which are determined by sex, that's gender. They are determined by age. They are determined by social class. And so the performance cannot be generalized. If, for instance, we have somebody who has to perform reconciliation rituals in my land, not anybody can do it. And so even if we store it, the incantations, if we digitize them, the incantations, whoever recites it from the digital space will be doing it like children reciting some poetry, because the spiritual part of it will not be respected. The spiritual the spiritual implications won't be felt because the community has not given that person the powers to do the rituals. And so as advice, they should always seek informed consent and respect cultural protocols. They should always seek informed consent and respect cultural protocols. Another piece of advice would be that they should build for African languages. Many African languages remain underrepresented in digital technology. Every speech, data set, dictionary, transcription tool, or translation model you create can help ensure that future generations can learn and use their mother tongue. Because the African languages have their own philosophy. They have their own communication, which only those within that community understand very well. For instance, translating from the mother tongue into English in order to cause the world to understand will definitely lead to the losing of the essential message, because translation goes with loss of the originality. And so they should make sure that in their database, they should create spaces, they should create models that will take charge African languages. And then it doesn't suffice working only across, with they're creating that. They should equally learn to work across disciplines in order to build very sustainable systems, AI systems. They should work across disciplines, because if you take, for instance, if you take only the African oral literature that I'm an expert in, if you take only the heritage restitution, or you take only the cultural aspect, and you forget about the indigenous knowledge systems, then you wouldn't have done justice to the community. And this is where restitution has a challenge, in the sense that restitution talks things that restitution activists or restitution activists feel that returning objects means returning restituting. And in my opinion, when you return objects and you keep the memory, then you haven't returned anything, because what makes that whatever you call object, which I don't prefer to call object, I prefer to give it the respect that Africans give by calling it our possessions. When you hand back our possessions to us and you keep the knowledge, you don't restore that indigenous knowledge systems, then you haven't done any restitution. So restitution should not only talk about the return of objects or return of human remains. It should also be the revitalization of our knowledge systems, because that knowledge system is our identity. And so if any young African is developing an AI system or model which does not take into consideration these cultural sensitivities of the Africans, then there is definitely something that is lacking. And as I said, they should build across disciplines. Once you build across disciplines, then it means your knowledge is englobing. These are some of the ideas that have been running through my mind as we discuss. Maybe we continue building as we discuss further. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Bulami. Actually, you explained what a little concerned with a reason why we even put the politics in this, because it's a living archive, July series 2026, week 3, AI, algorithms, memory, politics. And when machine plays memory, whose stories shape our shared future? Thank you so much, Bulami. Was a constructive contribution a lot. And Tatenda, we'd like to have you intention on storytelling, if has always transformed into wisdom. Can artificial intelligence ever understand stories deeply enough to preserve their cultural significance? Or will there always be something uniquely human? They have mentioned the national language process, NLP. They have mentioned how this AI data set must also be trained. Storytelling, how may align the ethical consideration. And we normally know FPIC, free pre-roll consent format, but they bring also the belongingness that always are likely to a celebration. People talks about diversity, inclusion, and equity. However, this belongingness we may understand from the status in which the community gives to their possession. Thank you for calling it a possession, not an artifact. And if you got a question, Tatenda, you can go with it. Thank you.
Okay, if I understood well, your question was based on storytelling and its place within the AI systems. That was the question?
Yeah. Sure. Storytelling has always transformed into wisdom, this transformation.
Okay.
Right? So can really artificial intelligence ever understand the stories deeply enough to preserve their cultural significance? Or will there always be something uniquely human?
Okay, so I think to answer this, I would want to start by addressing certain key issues that I feel like there are huge misconceptions when it comes to artificial intelligence and any other technologies. I think most often I hear people talking about the data being of course, it's part of the central aspect that contributes to how AI performs, but then it even goes beyond to the structure. So the structure is the housing, and that structure is the one that processes the data. So if that structure is not built on African, so for example, in the case of Africa, on African philosophies, on African values, even if we put correct data, even if we put good, clean data, which reflects African Africanness, if I can put it that way, we will still be lagging behind and likely will run into an aspect where we will be continuing to have more cultural distortions, but at the same time we'll be running in a situation where we'll be unintentionally erasing our culture in a way, because our culture, I believe there are some small details that you have to make sure that these details they are included in our culture. So if the artificial intelligence system, if the artificial intelligence framework is not built upon African philosophies, African values, if it's not built within the understanding of the relational aspects of us as Africans, again, as indigenous peoples, then even if we put good stories, even the stories are coming from the traditional leaders and even the elders, those stories will not make much sense, So even if, again, we take the same data sets that we can say, this is clean data, this is data coming from the actual cultural holders, but as long as the framework is wrong, it's quite tricky. So what do I mean by framework? Number one, I'm talking of the language. So you will be noticing that it's an artificial intelligence system which is built upon Eurocentric frameworks. So what does it mean? It means that it thinks in English and it tries to process things, within the African context. And then what it means is that in most cases, and as much as we can use trained data, which is quality, it will be lacking the context. It will be lacking that agency of the indigenous people, that agency of the African people. So I think that is the first misconception and also aspect that I would love to address before I get into the depth of it. So another thing is I would want us to recognize and realize that it's not a must that our stories should be on artificial intelligence. There should be a need. So is there a real need that our stories should be on those AI systems? That is the question. Are we the ones who are to decide that? No, it's not us. It's the community and it's also the knowledge holders. I think that they're the ones who are in the right position, to decide whether these stories should be put. So it doesn't have to be because there is technology, because everyone is talking about artificial intelligence. So we force and push our culture to be there. Yes, as Africans, we don't want to be left behind, but at the same time, we need to understand what we are getting ourselves into. So those are the key components. But I will tell you one thing, and this is mainly from the key lessons that I'm getting here from New Zealand, but again from different indigenous populations that I've seen also in Southeast Asia. I think one interesting part or one interesting aspect is that technology can be designed from an indigenous perspective. Why can't we think of it from an indigenous perspective? AI from an indigenous perspective before we start to force our indigenous knowledge systems, our stories into the systems that have been already designed. And they're not designed for us. Let's be honest. They're not designed for our knowledge systems. They're designed for a certain knowledge system which doesn't conform with us. So I think it has to go back to how we look at the underlying philosophies that shape our culture, the underlying philosophies that drive our heritage, the underlying philosophies that shape who we are as Africans. So just because the West and the big techs are pushing you to go for AI, does it mean that we should also force our culture to be there? So I think those are the key questions that we should be asking ourselves. And I don't want just to play maybe a bit blind on whether we should consider these stories being included in these AI systems. Yes, I do agree that there are quite a number of benefits that comes with these AI systems, but I want us to pause and reflect and decide to build these systems from ground zero using our own philosophies. I do believe that in that same way when the Great Zimbabwe was constructed using African ingenuity, the same way that we have Mapungubwe, the same way that we have the temples of Libela, that is technology. Why can't we think about it from our own context, from our own perspective? So the battle or the idea should not be for us to fit in, but it's for us to understand what our cultural needs are, understand what our story or what makes survival for cultural heritage easy, but also sustainable, because we need to have something that we have full control over. So that would be my answer, and I think I would love to encourage a lot of people, and most people, not just to force ourselves into this narrative just because a big tech companies is pushing AI as a good thing. I'm not saying it's a bad thing, but I think we need to reflect first. And before we even think of putting our stories into those systems, we need to go back to the communities. What are the needs of the communities when it comes to these systems? And I'll tell you, of course, they are being used in different parts, in agriculture and in other areas. But I would want us to push ourselves to say, if we are to build these technologies, they should reflect our values. They should be built upon our value systems. Those aspects of relational, those aspects of data, because it's not only about taking the data, it's not only about training the data, but where is that data going to be stored? Are the communities aware of how their data is going to be used? Are they aware of how these systems make decisions using their data? So we need to ask ourselves those questions and find ways on how we can address them, so that we are dealing with something that we are so sure that we can control and we can manage. And in the end of the day, we will not be participating in the erasure of our culture, in the erasure of our stories, in the name of innovation. So I think that's my main contribution. Thank you.
So sorry, the connectivity issue was around. Can you hear me well? Hello? Can you hear me well?
Yeah, we can get you.
Oh, sorry for such an inconvenience. Actually, Tatenda was elaborating on this. The digital infrastructure is among the top priority in which African Union and the nations should address very well before heading to the AI as the pillars to be built on that foundation of digital infrastructure. So independent connectivity, independent crowd servers are among the critical along the agenda. Thank you so much, Tatenda. As we heading to the last question of yours before letting you go to get bed, and you often bridge indigenous knowledge systems with governance. And what responsibilities should government and institutions carry to ensure communities remain active custodians, not passive sources of their knowledge in the age of AI? And I'd like you to link this to the fifth aspiration of Africa I want. In Africa, we have a strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values, and ethics. Thank you, Tatenda. Was my question clear enough to? I've been addressed to you, Tatenda, to let you heading to bed, actually, and as we're heading to the close of the session. But this question reflecting to you. The knowledge, I've been addressing this question to you, Tatenda. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you come again with your question?
You have often bridged indigenous knowledge systems with the governance. What responsibilities should governments and institutions carry to ensure communities remain active custodians, not passive sources of their knowledge in the age of AI? And I'd like you to link this to the fifth aspiration of Africa I want. In Africa, we have a strong cultural identity, common heritage, shared values, and ethics.
Okay. Interesting. I think I look at indigenous knowledge systems and governance principles from two perspectives. One which is based on who controls the cultural data and how is it being controlled. By control, I mean manage. How is it being managed? Now also, because we are now living in I would say in a web kind of society, it even goes beyond the question of how is it being managed, but also who is using that indigenous knowledge systems and for what? Why am I saying so? Because we have issues to do with IP, intellectual property issues. We have issues to do with commodification of cultural knowledge, which is also indigenous knowledge systems. We have issues to do with, misinterpretations, but also we are having also cases where this same knowledge is now being used by non-knowledge holders for monetary purposes, but at the same time, just for them to gain, I would say, including communities without communities. So that, I mean, those are the key aspects when I look at governance. But then when I again look at it outside of just governance of the data, governance of the knowledge systems, and management of the knowledge systems, I will look at it again from a government perspective, which is different from this cultural governance, from this knowledge systems governance, data governance. So the role of governments in ensuring that, you know, these knowledge systems are well preserved, I would say sustainably, that is for the future generations. I think the first step for me, and just taking lessons from the cases that I'm seeing here in the Pacific, is number one, the first thing that, you know, governments need to do is to decolonize. I don't actually resonate with the term decolonize. If there is a better term, I would have used it. But I would say to relook and review the education system, because everything, it goes back to the education system. So you will notice that we are talking of decolonization within the context of colonization. That's the bigger challenge that we have been facing. So how do we now decolonize, or rather reframe and redefine our curriculum, our education systems, so that number one, it prioritizes indigenous languages, right? I think that should be the first thing. And I understand you have been in Italy, and you have noticed that most of the things in Italy, they're in Italian. That is the first, you know, the first process. Why am I? Yes, why am I more focusing on the languages? You know, because of these languages, we have lost a lot of things in translation, but also we have lost a lot of knowledge systems, because the language is vanishing slow but surely, or maybe fast and surely at the same time. That's my first understanding. And then it goes back now even to the technologies. So I want you to understand that when we talk of technologies not, or AI not representing indigenous knowledge systems, AI not representing African people, it didn't start with AI. It started with Facebook. It started with whichever technology, techno-science that you are using. Remember, it was built upon who? It was built upon the Western language system. It was built upon the Western ways of doing things, and again the philosophies. So the first thing would be to look at how can the education curriculum, and I think Zimbabwe is doing something like that, where they're trying to put for heritage-based education. So I do believe that if governments can look at it from that perspective, where education should be grounded in indigenous knowledge systems, in indigenous frameworks, education should be grounded in local values. I think that should be the first starting point. And again, if governments, the same governments, can do justice by ensuring that our indigenous languages, they are represented everywhere, you know. So that way, it will allow us to move towards reclaiming our culture, you know, because what we are seeing now is we are seeing the, you know, colonization rewriting itself, you know, where in most schools you'll be hearing that students are being forced to speak in English. Yeah, but where is our language?
And the parents are working so hard to pay them the fees.
You know, so that should be, I think, if governments can enforce that, you know what, for every school, indigenous languages should be, because there's a lot in language. That's where our ideologies are hidden. That's where our values, our philosophies are hidden. in the language.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because we are not following that same language, we have lost a lot. So
Wow.
that's the first thing. So it doesn't, it starts with the education system, the education curriculum. Then it goes again into government, ensuring that even streets, they can be given, indigenous, names, indigenous, whatever. Because I have been having some worries where we often talk of decolonization, but we are critiquing it from the English language. We are using the English language to critique, So that's my main worry, and I think if we can win that, and if governments can do that, I believe the government of Zimbabwe is doing that. I've been also seeing that the government of South Africa, yes, has been doing also that, trying to, to integrate indigenous knowledge systems in the education system. So I think that should be the first step. And I've seen it happening here in New Zealand. I've seen it happening in parts of the Pacific, where a lot of now things, even in, you talk of architecture, is now being integrated in indigenous knowledge systems. You talk of education, you talk of health. They are now looking at it from
climate change.
Yes. So even if we are to
economy.
Yes. So even if we are to make sure that our research, even our research, our research methodologies, they should be shaped by these indigenous knowledge systems and also the philosophies. Imagine having an Ubuntu philosophy, an Ubuntu research methodology, Ubuntu research design, pushing research agenda. So I think that should be the first, and maybe the second thing, making sure that institutes of higher learning, they prioritize that. They focus on developing knowledge.
Also arriving.
Yes. I mean, if you had to say integrating indigenous knowledge systems will not push innovation, I think that would be wrong, because we have Great Zimbabwe, we have Mapungubwe again. Imagine if we had to learn using those philosophies. I think so. That should be the first thing and the first step. So it's bundled together within that whole process of redefining, rethinking, and reclaiming. And I think the first thing also is to understand that what we have been doing, we've been doing probably the wrong way. So how do we make sure that we reclaim what we have lost within the process? So, yeah.
Wow, thank you so much, Tatenda. Thank you so much. I noticed something beautiful emerging today. Tatenda, you really remind us that AI must become community-centered. And as you're closing your hints, you've been wondering what could be a way forward. And remember, today we've been assessing how the AI, the knowledge system, the knowledge, the political perspective is coming along. And the last question addressed to Jeanette and Dr. Bulami. Actually, main education system are shifting toward digital learning and AI-assisted knowledge. However, we understood that the Ubuntu systems, there could be a digital transformation toward the best of community, if I catch what Tatenda have been expressing for I am cause we are. And addressing this question to Jeanette and Dr. Bulami, how do we balance human memory and the digital memory so that technology develops not only competent professionals, but responsible citizens grounded in identity, empathy, and community?
Can I ask you to just repeat the question? I missed you there a bit.
Yeah, the question was asking how do we balance? I mean, many education systems now are shifting toward digital learning and AI assisted knowledge. How do we balance human memory and the digital memory so that technology develops not only competent professionals but responsible citizens grounded in identity, empathy, and the community? From your perspective as the one in data management, the motherhood, as you've been coming to carry out that from school, and I think this addressed to you, Jeanette, very well, and you pretty much fit it.
Um, I like to think the future of digital memory and not only like the future of memory in all our countries is not cannot be only based on technology. We need to also ensure that we attach values to this. I think it's that Tatenda was talking about the questions he asked. Does everything really need to be digitized? So that's where we all need to start from and look at, do we really need to digitize everything? And if the answer is yes, what ethics and values do we attach to that? Because digitizing everything might come with challenges. I'll just a quick example. I don't know if you guys know, there was a movie here in South Africa called Inxeba that focused on it was focused on the Xhosa initiation processes. And it was a big pain issue for a lot of people because some of the information and knowledge, it is regarded as sacred, is regarded as private. So even if we need to educate about those, we cannot necessarily digitize everything and make it accessible to everyone. A doctor also stated that as well. There are things that need to remain sacred that cannot be digitized, and I believe they cannot be, even though we need to bridge the gap between digitization and our indigenous knowledge so that it's there, it's accessible. And it, because of the changes that we're seeing, a lot of elderly people passing away and they living with what they know, we still need to make sure that we govern those things. So the education system is well good when it's focusing on digitizing things. Kids are using tablets. I mean, in my household, I have kids between the ages of 20 and 9. The 9-year-old is better technologically inclined than I am. She uses a tablet 80% of the time. But there are things that I will teach them as a parent, as a family, that are based on our tradition, our values, and that cannot be part of the digital world. Even if I was to do it, I mean, culture differs. However, there are those elements that we can add to the digitized environment so that it crosses, it has a bigger audience. Um, which is also great for learning because we get to understand each other. Another simple example about my life is I have kids that have names that are not even they have South African names and non-South African names. My last born has a Ugandan name. I have never been, but I loved the name and I loved what it meant. And I took it from there because I researched the name and realized this name aligns with my child. My child's name is Akilo. If somebody asks me why your child is Akilo, you've never been to that country, I read about it. That is digitization because I was able to get the meaning and align it with my child. However, there are certain things that even if we do that, we need to also refrain from. But I think combining human tradition and AI will create a good platform if we have great governance structures, if it's designed by those people. I think Doc also said this, the students need to talk to the communities. They need to align with the people on the ground to ensure that the knowledge and the info that's out there, it's the true reflection. I'll always say the true reflection, because we cannot distort the culture and say this is Like South Africa has how many languages and a million cultures on its own, and I cannot say this is a Zulu culture. I myself am not Zulu. I'm not even privy to some of the things they do. So if I am to go out there and start digitizing, I need to make sure that is a true reflection. And every other country in Africa need to have that true reflection of what the country is about. And also we need to, just being a devil advocate, we cannot shy away from the presence of digitization and artificial intelligence. We need to harness the strengths. We need to make sure that, I would say, governance and ethics, but we need to harness the strength, and we need to make sure that the families are involved, the communities are involved, and the stories that we tell will build our identity and will also preserve who we are as Africans. And I will always emphasize the identity of Africans cannot be compromised when we start looking at digitization, because it is who we are, it's our history, it's our future, and we cannot compromise on how we package it and give it to the world. So we need to package it, we need to tell our stories our way. And if we remove ourselves completely from the digital world, people will tell our stories and we will start complaining again. We have movies that are talking about our countries that we don't even have produced. The actors are not even African. They will get somebody from other countries to come in. They have to teach them the accent, for example, before they can even go anywhere. So that is where we need to be and start playing in that environment to ensure that what is out there, it is ours, and it's a true reflection of who we are as Africans. Thank you.
Wow. 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 Yes, over to you, Bulami.
Yeah,
Same question.
really,
What you think? Okay.
I
Yes,
say
please.
I really appreciate her perspective. It is really, really wonderful. Okay, I will love to begin by stating that preserving cultural diversity is not about resisting innovations. It is about ensuring that innovations respect and enriches the many ways human communities understand the world. And similarly, technology itself is neither inherently good nor inherently bad. Its impact depends on the values that guide its use. Yes, digital technologies can strengthen cultural diversity, but only if they are developed with cultural diversity as a goal rather than treating it as an afterthought. For Africa, digital technologies present extraordinary opportunities. We don't deny that. I believe digital technologies achieve their highest purpose when they enable every community to preserve its unique voice while participating confidently in the global conversations. So, if the African voice is only heard as an afterthought, if the African voice is only there to appreciate what AI developers have done for their communities, then that exclusion makes us question the essence of AI in our society. For example, in the Nsot community, I hail from the Nsot community. I always like to go back to my community to draw from. Digital tools can record elders narrating migrations histories. They can record elders telling folk tales, using proverbs, royal genealogy, narrating royal genealogies, and then songs and all these. These recordings can become educational. They can become educational resources for schools and for members of the diaspora who may never have had the opportunity to learn directly from their grandparents. Meaning that AI is not totally bad. AI is not inherently bad, and it is not inherently good, because AI can serve it serves different purposes, and so long as the AI is the AI is developed, the model is developed with community participation, with community voice being inclusive, with the custodians of that community having their voice in it. The AI is not that bad. So these recordings, as I said, can become educational resources, and especially for the Africans who are no longer living in their communities, who are in their living elsewhere in the diaspora. For instance, imagine my son gets up while we are in the US or in Europe, who has been off from home for a very long time, and then trying to understand and master the Lamso, and Lamso, which is my language, and he gets onto the digital platform and then sees an elder from so speaking, giving a narrative, narrating a story in Lamso, maybe with a subtitling in English. That becomes amazing to that child, and it is there that digital technology could be very useful. So digital technologies can support the restitution of cultural heritage. I am going there because it is also my concern. It beats my imagination when I hear that the 3D, three-dimensional scans are representing African heritage, which could be restituted.
Yeah.
When I listen to that, it's more like provocation, because you can't steal. Let me not be a little harsh here. You can't steal from me, and then tomorrow you decide to send me a photocopy of what you have stolen from me. It doesn't look real. And what I have found in the process of restitution is that the colonial narratives are still very, very strong. And why are they strong? Yeah, they are still very strong. You listen to the Western world gives back these stolen possessions as if they are benefactors, to Africans, and they want Africans to appreciate them and say thank you for giving back what you stole from me. And if these narratives go into the AI to see that these things were given to Africans who appreciated the fact that the white man or the Western world kept these things safely, and that we, the Africans, are unable to manage them. These are narratives that ought not to go into our digital spaces, because they will still carry those colonial distortions, the same colonial distortions that we are asking that in the age of digitization, in the age of AI, we should decolonize. My fellow contributor was really questioning the word decolonizing, that we are talking about decolonizing using the English language, which is a colonial language. That is the destiny of the Africans. And so we only have to manage, but in all in life, it is about compromise. It is about compromise.
Yeah.
It is about building new relationships. When it comes now to this idea of decolonial dialogues, we are looking at building new relationships and saying we have forgiven those who did this. The present generation is not the generation that did what they did, but they should listen to us, tell our stories in our own language, with our own voices. And in that case, now we will have digital archives which reflects the African, our own African society. So the AI is not bad. AI is excellent, it is good, it is, I don't know, better, but let the communities tell their stories. Let AI preserve whatever they get, but let communities give meaning to whatever is taught in AI. Thank you.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. What a wonderful session. Now 21 minutes past 4. It means that we had a wonderful conversation, a meaningful one for now and the future generation. And reflecting to what I've got from the contributors, we thank you so much. I've noticed something beautiful emerging today as Tatenda reminds us that AI must become community-centered. Dr. Bulami was reminding us that community have always placed living intelligence. Thank you so much for that. Jeanette reminded us that the knowledge only becomes meaningful when it remains connected to people, governance, and lived experience. Perhaps the future is not about choosing between artificial intelligence and indigenous intelligence. Perhaps it is about allowing each and everyone to strengthen the other. And I think if there is nothing left behind, like closing remarks, this is your time before closing our session. And thank you for such a wonderful contribution, each and everyone.
Thank
The
you
closing
so much.
remarks, 1 minute each and everyone.
Okay. Let me just say that the age of algorithms must not become the age in which communities lose control of their own stories. The highest achievement of digital technology is not to collect the world's cultures, but to empower the world's cultures to speak for themselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Insightful, Dr. Bulami. Thank you so much. And your time, Janet.
Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me once more. And just
You're welcome.
to read out, it says, if AI safeguards our languages, culture, stories, and collective wisdom, while nurturing relationships, digital memory will never replace our first archives, which is the family and the human wisdom, because that is where the crust of everything stands. So humans are very important for collaboration, for networking, and also for growing those systems that we are using. And AI tools and any other digital tool, they are tools, they are enablers. But the human mind is the most important aspect in all that we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for such a closing remarks, Janet, Dr. Bulami, and Tatenda have gone to bed. It was a wonderful conversation from Central Africa. I mean, the heart of Africa, Rwanda, to the South Africa as the region, but as the country, to the west of Africa, Cameroon represented. This is what we intend to do. Zimbabwe was there. Even though coming from other, share the experience from Pacific and other parts of the globe, New Zealand, where he's located. This is what we mean by a borderless digital heritage ecosystem. This is what we intend to do, particularly when it comes to the African Living Archives. And a Living Archive is a monthly decalling podcast kinda, and we always giving you a warm welcome as you really need to contribute. As you have any theme you think maybe the next or concerned with a certain month areas, we are open to receiving from you. Thank you so much once again. And wow, as we're heading to close our session, I'd like to conclude with one final invitation. Imagine someone opening this recording 50 years from now. What single sentence would you leave for that generation? If today's dialogue became part of a living archive, What wisdom would you hope they inherit? Drop in the comment and as your takeaway. Closing right here. Today we have spoken about artificial intelligence, but perhaps our deeper conversation has always been our responsibility. Responsibility for memory, responsibility for culture, responsibility for one another, because artificial intelligence may shape the future of memory, but one ordinary humanity can shape the future of wisdom. On behalf of IRAGE Corporation LLC, the Digital Heritage Preservationist Platform, and everyone who believes archives should remain living spaces for dialogue, thank you to our contributors, our partners, and every participant joining us from around the world. One memory, I'd like to always remember that our memory is our future. Our future is our shared responsibility. Thank you for helping us to breathe a living archive. Your host, Elisha. Thank you so much. To the host, it was a great pleasure to have you all around.
Thank you.
Siabon, Jeanette. Thank you. Big time. Wow. African spirity within African generations. Wow. Thank you.